Judith Sonnet was like, I see you're 2 girls, 1 cup, and I raise you 3 girls and 1 prolapsed anus. Oh my gosh, a butt. Oh, and then by the time the zombies have gotten close enough, it's too late and they get it. Hello. Today I want to talk about extreme horror author Judith Sonnet. Before doing this video, I had previously read 3 of her books. The first book I ever read from her is called Magic. I read that back a few months ago. I also read No One Rides for Free, and then just recently I read Fetal Backwash, which I enjoyed thoroughly. So that's kind of what sparked me wanting to do this video about her. Today, I'm going to focus on 6 new books that I read specifically for this video. So in a very unexpected turn of events, Judith actually reached out to me and emailed me and offered to send me a few of her books for this video, which was so unexpected. Obviously, I'm a very small channel. I have less than 500 subscribers, and I fully intended to do this video regardless. I thought that was a very kind and gracious offer for her to send books to me. So now I get to not only read them, but have a physical copy. So Judith, if you're watching this, thank you again. I thought that was so kind, and I do really appreciate it. So I read the 3 that she sent me, and then I also read 3 on my Kindle app on my phone. I want to start off with talking about The Clown Hunt. Out of the ones that I've read, I believe that this one is her most popular one. Now, I specifically wanted to check this one out because I am one of the few people on God's green earth who is not afraid of clowns. I am not disturbed by clowns. I don't particularly like clowns. I'm just sort of indifferent to them. But I keep trying. I keep trying to be afraid of clowns. There was a time in the States, I don't think it was something that was going on elsewhere in the world. I believe it was just the States. If I'm wrong about that, my bad. There was just this really weird trend going on where people were dressing up like clowns and just going outside and trying to scare people. It just became this weird trend that people were doing for reasons. They were bored, I guess. So this is kind of a throwback to all of that when that was happening. The book has a little bit of an intro that takes place in 2010. So there is a home invasion involving a clown, and in the end there is only 1 survivor. After that, we jump forward in time 6 years, so we're in 2016 now, and we are focused on some different characters. Our main character is named Willow. Now Willow is going through it. Willow is a gay black man living in Arkansas, so already not great for him. He gets fired from his job. His boyfriend breaks up with him and kicks him out of their apartment. He is just down on his luck, just one bad thing after another. One thing leads to another, and he ends up getting involved in prostitution. So Willow is a very sympathetic character. You really feel for him. He's clearly going through a very difficult time. Through his new occupation, he ends up having to dress up like a clown for a bachelor party. He's going there to be a stripper. It's like a clown stripper. It's a whole thing. It doesn't matter. That is why he is dressed up as a clown. His pimp friend guy is driving him to this bachelor party where he's going to perform. At which time they get driven off the road and kidnapped. He is thrown together with a bunch of other people who are also dressed like clowns. There are some people who hate clowns and think that they're a stain on our society, and they want to hunt them down. So our title, The Clown Hunt, the clowns are not the ones doing the hunting. They are the ones being hunted. And that's the basic plot. I struggled a little bit at the beginning because I read this right after I finished reading a bunch of those Bizarro books. This book is not Bizarro. It doesn't claim to be Bizarro. It's just like an extreme horror book. But because my brain was still kind of in Bizarro mode, I kept expecting there to be more weirdness, I guess. What I wanted, because of the mode that I was in, when all the clowns were kidnapped in the van and then they get to their location and they get out, I wanted them to get out of the van and then like look back and it's actually like a tiny little car. And I wanted, you know how clowns have the handkerchiefs that you pull them out of their sleeves and they're tied together and they just keep coming out, you know? I wanted them to be running through the woods and for their handkerchief to get caught on a branch, and then the hunters come and they have to run and hide, and there's just like this string of handkerchiefs leading the hunter straight to the clown. Like stuff like that, or the hunter finds the clown and grabs him by the shirt, and then his little flower pin squirts water in his eye, and he kept waiting for stuff like that to happen. But that's not what this book is. It doesn't claim to be that. I was just having a hard time letting go of the silliness of Bizarro, and I kept expecting it in this book, and that's not what this book is. This book is just an extreme horror book. I did actually laugh out loud though during the kidnap scene when they're all in the back of the car. I was just minding my business, reading this book and snacking on some pistachios, as one does, and there's this line when they're in the back of the van together, finding out who each other is, and one of the men just looks at everyone else and he's like, "Are you guys juggalos too?" And I literally choked on my pistachios. I haven't heard the word juggalo in so many years. Oh my goodness. But yeah, so that was Judith's first attempt on my life, but I overcame. So good try, but you're gonna have to try again. Now, then this scene happens and shit got real. And when that scene happened, I don't want to spoil it for you. There's this scene with the juggalo. It's a couple, actually. With the juggalo couple that was very impactful. It kind of brought me back. I'm like, oh, okay. We are in extreme horror, and this is where I'm supposed to be. Needless to say, this did turn out to be way more gruesome and gory and the yuck. Like, this one has a lot of grossness in it too. I can understand why this is one of her more popular books, although I do still think that a scene of a bunch of people in gigantic clown shoes trying to run through a forest while they're being chased would have been magnificent. So it actually turned out that there is quite a lot to unpack in this book. It felt like there was some commentary regarding misplaced aggression. People are lashing out at these clowns because of things that other clowns did. These people did nothing. It seems like there's a bit of commentary about demonizing people because of who they are associated with, and doing things, by the way, that are way, way worse. There's a big difference between an eye for an eye and decapitating someone over an eye. Not necessarily that she wanted this book to be political per se, but I do think that there is some social commentary there to be had. I also really like the ending. I thought it was a very appropriate ending, and I was happy she went the direction with it that she did. Okay, next up. Sorry. Next up, we have Splatter-Saurus. It's about dinosaurs attacking. So despite this having a very silly premise, obviously, she does treat the dinosaurs realistically, like they behave like animals. There's this family, they live on a lake, and they rent out cabins in the area. It's called Meteorite Acres, and the lake there is called Crater Pond. Presumably there was a meteorite in the past, and that's what created the hole where the water is, and so that's why it's called that. Presumably also how the dinosaurs got there, question mark. So in this book, Judith actually sets up very innocent, precious moments right before she destroys them. A little boy in a boat playing in the pond, and the dinosaur gets him. This couple who are just very young, they want to lose their virginity to each other, and it's like this big moment in their life, but then they get eaten by the dinosaur. All these precious, innocent moments being set up and then obliterated by a fucking dinosaur crashing in, like the Kool-Aid Man crashing through the wall. So the way these scenes and the way these characters are set up, it's enough to make you feel kind of bad about their deaths, but it's not super deep. It's just meant to be fun and silly and gory, and it definitely is. It's meant to be kind of cheesy like those old movies. The death scenes are fast and gruesome. I did think it was kind of funny. Some of these characters are very religious, and so when they come to face with a dinosaur, their mind automatically assumes that it's a demon. It also kind of touches on the subject of, would you be willing to sacrifice your friend in order to save your life? There's like little bits like that give it a sense of, does tie it to reality a little bit. The real ways that, people coming from certain perspectives are going to think about things. And also just that very human struggle of not wanting to be a bad person, but also that sense of self-preservation becoming stronger than your urge to be a good friend. But truly, nothing in this is going to get super deep. It's meant to be cheesy and fun and gory on the lighter end of the spectrum out of what I've read for Judith. Okay, so next up I'm going to talk about one of the ones she actually sent me. Summer Never Ends is about a 13-year-old boy named Tanner who is going to a church camp for the summer. This takes place back in 1985. Now, I do not know what it's like to be a 13-year-old boy, but if I had to guess, this seems like a very accurate depiction of what I would imagine, I guess. They get to this camp, it's not well maintained, and some of the other boys that he's kind of starting to try to form a friendship with want to show him this isolated cabin that they're not supposed to go to. It's not part of the camp. It's just like this separate hidden thing. And they are like, oh, come with us. And then they want to go show him. And they stumble upon something that switches things up. Everything leading up to that point is the build-up, and then everything after that is the payoff. Obviously, shit gets real and it gets real fast. I thought this had a very dark, satisfying ending. This poor kid, that feeling of when you're a teenager, which can also occur in adulthood, just when you can't get anything right, and then you finally get a chance to maybe do something and you fuck it up. Like, this kid, Tanner, cannot catch a break, cannot get it right in such a crucial situation. He just keeps fucking up. It's like kind of funny, but you also feel bad for him. Everything that happens in the beginning of the book, him, a 13-year-old boy struggling to make friends, not really wanting to talk to the younger kids, but hoping that the older kids will want to talk to him. Just still exploring who he is and what his interests are, who he wants to align with. There's a lot to relate to Tanner in the beginning of the book that makes you care about what happens to him in the second half. That being said, though, this is the type of book where it is gory and violent, but I did not struggle to read it. Personally, I know, different people have different triggers, different things that are hard to read. For me personally, this was just a fun, gory read. You know me, I like a good coming-of-age story that ends in bloodshed. I wanted to make sure that I didn't only read Splatterpunk extreme horror, because she does branch out into other subgenres a bit. Earth versus the Nudist Camp Freaks. So I'm like, okay, I want to read that one. And this is gonna sound really strange, but based off of the title, but this was actually so cute. This was so cute. This was like a throwback to old 50s movies. She clearly has a liking to those. This was also part of a 10-day challenge, which, in general, I will say I prefer her books that aren't 10-day challenges. I feel like you can tell the difference in the ones that she takes more time with, but she does them so often, and I do think it's rather impressive to be able to pull that off. So it only felt appropriate to make sure that I included at least one 10-day challenge in this, This is also the tamest book by far. Yeah, so this is a throwback to old 50s B-movies. The beginning of the book, she just wrote out trailers for other movies, which I thought was very cute. The premise of this is that aliens have come to Earth. They happen to land down near this nudist camp. And so when they start taking people, of course, why wouldn't they do that? They're like, yoink, and they like take them. This is like a crossover because it's aliens, but it's also zombies. The aliens basically zombify all of these naked people. There's the Sheriff Chet who is trying to get a grasp on what goes on here. The lingo that's used in it is very appropriate for the time period. It sounds like it reminds me of Scooby-Doo, just cripes. It's very cartoony in the way things happen. The alien shoots beams out of its hands and then it shocks the person and it's just their skeleton that's left and then the bones crash down. Stuff like that. And the entire time they're talking in the 50s lingo and they're talking about commies. So you have to imagine, like, the dialogue felt so perfect. I could hear it. I could hear the dialogue being spoken in that sort of cadence from that time period. Chet, what are you doing? It's okay, Priscilla. I know what I'm doing. My favorite line from this entire book. You're no match for me, spaceman. I'm an American. Perfection. This was so funny. I liked this one a lot. I wanted to make sure that I read something that was going to showcase her sense of humor because I loved it so much in the Bizarro book that I read, Fetal Backwash, and I wanted to make sure that I got to enjoy more of that. Generally speaking, I am inclined to lean towards the books that showcase her humor the most. If you are intrigued by Judith Sonnet at all, but you're not really into extreme horror, I would definitely recommend Earth versus the Nudist Camp Freaks. It was very funny and very cute. Judith does seem to do a decent amount of collaborations. I don't want to include collaborations in the video because you just never know who contributed what to the story, right? This is a little bit different though because she wrote this book by herself, but there were two other authors who also wrote their own 10-day challenge. So I just want to acknowledge that quickly. I can't recommend these because I haven't read them, but it feels appropriate to mention that they exist. So to go along with Earth versus the Nudist Camp Freaks, we have Earth versus the Lava Spiders. That's by Candace Nola. And Earth versus the Star Mummy by Lucas Mangum. Blood and Brains. So this is actually two novellas that are put together. Our first novella is about vampires and the second one is about zombies. And I thought that this was particularly appropriate for this time of year. From Blood and Brains, the first story is called Bloodsuck, and it is about these three sisters. Oh no. Oh no. Oh god. Okay, this is about three sisters, Roxy, Baylor, and Jazz. And they are involved in making fetish adult films, particularly leaning towards snuff type stuff. Think about this, it's a little easier for them to accomplish this because they're all vampires. This book, Bloodsuck in particular, this made me squirm. This, like, truly, this made me squirm. This was so, like, hard to, like, I had to look away. You know when you're reading something and it just, like it hits you and you have to, like, look away and, like, give it a second, get your bearings, and then go back to it? I cannot tell you several times reading this one in particular. It's getting into how they became vampires in the first place. It's also getting into how they go about making their films. So it's a dark premise. There's this, oh my god, there's the scene. Oh, I can't. I've said in other videos that I am sensitive to babies and animals, those two things. Well, it turns out that I found a third thing that I am sensitive to: babies, animals, and prolapsed anuses. Oh my god, that was so hard to read. Judith, what the fuck? This is what you're here for. This is what you came to do, and I'm happy for you, but, like, what the fuck? The sister Baylor has Down syndrome. Now, that doesn't play a huge role in the story overall. It's just sort of an added element that makes you feel real weird reading about some of the things. There's these moments of humor where it's like, especially Roxy, she's kind of meant to be like the ringleader, and there's just points where she's just too stupid to be afraid. So, but it works out until it doesn't, or does it? The only thing about this one is that it's not a twist per se, but there is a bit of a reveal towards the end, which I don't want to say I disliked, but I didn't love it. I just wasn't, like, I was kind of meh. Now the second book is called Sorry. It's called Zombie Vomit Shit Show. So there's this town, and within this town, there is this fenced-in area where there's just a bunch of zombies. And it's just like a chain link fence, and the zombies are just kept there. People know that they shouldn't go into this fenced in area, but there's nothing really keeping them out. They could climb over the fence at any time. And so it's the beginning of the book has this little boy Flick who you like a lot. He's very likable and very cute. He finds that there's a hole in the fence that's keeping the zombies at bay from the rest of the town. So the beginning of the book is just sort of setting up that these zombies are not adequately being contained, that there is not adequate security, and it's just not, it's just ripe with opportunities for people to take advantage of the situation, right? We go to different people in the town that are doing real weird things. The tapeworms and ringworms, parasites, they get real weird when they're feasting off of the undead flesh. That becomes relevant. And also there's I don't want to spoil everything. There's just weird shit going on in this town, okay? There's real weird shit that all has to do with these zombies and how easily accessible they are. It kind of reminded me a little bit of Pet Sematary in the sense of there being, it's not exactly cursed, but you know what I mean? Like this land that is just bad and all you have to do is just not go to it. But there's something about it that just kind of keeps calling you to it, but when you go to it, nothing good ever happens. It's always bad things happening when you go to it, but people just can't help themselves. And so this was also gory and fun. This is gross morally. These two books, they pair together really, really well. I think that this is a really fun book to read going into Halloween time. When you're reading extreme horror and you find one that legitimately makes you squirm, then it kind of feels like goal accomplished. Okay, now last but certainly not least, we have Psych Ward Blues. I did not realize this. This is actually a collection. There are several short stories in the beginning of the book, but the main book in here is also called Psych Ward Blues. I'm not really going to get into details about the short stories at the beginning because I do think that Psych Ward Blues there's a lot to get into there. Personally, out of what I've read, I think that Psych Ward Blues is Judith's best work. I think that it showcases her skill the best out of anything that I've read from her. It's definitely the heaviest read outside of not just the gruesome gore and stuff like that, but just the content itself is very heavy, very intense. She said in the afterword that a lot of the shorter stories in the beginning of the book, that some of them were previously published in other collections, or some of them were intended for other collections and then got rejected for one reason or another, and she was just happy to be able to get them out there, which is perfectly understandable. I enjoyed all of the short stories in the beginning, but I was surprised that she chose to combine them with Psych Ward Blues because it just felt, to me, it feels like such a standalone piece. And to be honest, the others, while I enjoyed them in isolation, I feel like they kind of pale in comparison to the main story in the book. And to be fair, there is a little bit of overlap in some of the subject matters that are discussed in some of the smaller stories in the beginning to what is also covered in Psych Ward Blues. There's a little bit of overlap on topics. This is based off of her personal experience where she actually did spend time in a psych ward. Now, it is not autobiographical. It is not based off of specific people that she met during that stay. However, it is inspired by her experiences. So our main character is a man named Chester Abernathy, and he's 30 years old. He experiences severe trauma when he is at a gay bar with his boyfriend, and there is a shooting. People with a weapon targeting people at a gay club, something that has happened here in the States. His boyfriend is killed, understandably experiencing severe PTSD as a result of this. He also does struggle with other issues that were unrelated to that event, self-harm, eating disorder. He tries to end his life. He is unsuccessful and ends up at a mental health facility. Part of the story is about Chester and about his personal struggles, about the people that he is meeting on the ward. At the same time that all of this is happening, there's also the rapture. So God is taking people from Earth and shooting them up to heaven. Now, this is not a beautiful, picturesque display. This is a rather violent occurrence that is happening. So when God decides he's going to shoot someone up to heaven, they kind of explode. It makes me think of like an alien, you know, where the thing like comes out, you know, and it just like busts out. Only it's their soul, and they'll just be standing there, and they'll just like bleh, their soul blob ascends to the heavens. I'm gonna give some spoilers for this because I want to, because I have to talk about it, but you should still read it. I'll try not to go too crazy with it. Heaven is not the Christian heaven that we know it to be. Heaven is actually the same as hell. They are one and the same. And so everyone, when they die, when they get raptured, they go to heaven, but they're not having a good time there. And keep in mind, this is Judith Sonnet. So if you are familiar with her, you can imagine, perhaps, what sorts of things go on. God is a madman on a power trip. God is just giggling, kicking his feet, and cannot wait to bring people from Earth to heaven so that he can fuck around with them and do real weird shit. You're already dead. Like, you can't die again. You're already dead. So he can just keep torturing you, and there is no end. The idea of that is so unsettling. The idea that no matter what you do and what a good person you are or how faithful you are or religious or anything, it does not matter. What you do on this earth, you will die. And when you die, there will be no peace for you. It will be nothing but torment. It's such a fucking heavy premise. Like, this book is so intense. You're jumping between the random people being raptured and these people who are now trapped on their ward because the nurses have been raptured. So it's a locked ward. They can't leave. They don't know what's going on. They're trying to figure it out. They all have reasons why they're there, right? But the nurses are gone now, so they don't have access to their medications. Some of these people only want to hurt themselves. Other people want to hurt others. Even if you survive this, you will eventually die. Whether you go now or you go later, you have an eternity of torment and agony to look forward to. And the idea of setting that against people who, before that realization, did not want to be here because of how terrible life on Earth is. Look at the news. I don't want to repeat the news that has come out just within the past few weeks, the cases that are going on in the world, but it makes you lose your faith in humanity. There are so many terrible people on Earth doing terrible things, not stories for entertainment, like real people doing really bad things. And the idea that heaven would be worse than the worst of what's on Earth is a terrifying premise. I thought it was also a very interesting choice on her part with the way she talks about the terrible things happening in heaven, that she describes it very much as being similar to the things that happen on Earth. When you think about the darkest, most depraved corners of Earth, and you imagine angels doing similar things. Their anatomy is a little bit different, they're fucking angels, but it's not magic. So much as you would expect, it's not magical. It's just worse humans. It was so impactful the way she talked about heaven. Like, she kind of stripped away the majesty from it. It's not just that it's not good. It's not just that heaven is actually evil and bad, but there was no majesty in it. Like, it didn't feel magical. It just felt like, it felt so human. It made me feel weird. I used to be a nursing assistant. I never worked at a mental health facility, but I did work in the nursing home, and I worked on their memory care unit. So I do feel like there is some overlap there because it is a locked unit. You are working with people who have severe dementia. And I remember working on that unit, and I always felt so bad for the residents there because they didn't understand why they were locked in, you know, and they wanted to leave and we couldn't let them leave. And so reading this and reading about the people in the facility with her that are trapped on this ward, who that sense of being trapped. So reading this, I couldn't help but think back on that time when I worked there and what that was like for those residents to, I would imagine, feel rather trapped and not really understanding what's going on around them or why. And I guess the last thing I want to say about it is I think she kind of talks about how it's easier to open up to other people who have similar struggles to you, that if a character is gonna trauma dump on someone, you don't really care for them to trauma dump back. You can't help but compare it in your head, that the things that they're complaining about seem trivial compared to the things that you've experienced. And so it's helpful to be surrounded by people who have experienced similar things. Anyone who has ever suffered from severe depression and had someone who's not depressed say something to them along the lines of, well, don't I make you happy? That sort of rhetoric. If you've never been severely depressed yourself, you might not realize not only is it not helpful, but you are actually actively making it worse. On top of the shame that is already there, you are now also adding guilt that person will feel because they're making you feel bad. And so when you surround yourself with other people who are or have been depressed, it's like they get it. They understand, and so they don't say things like that to you because they don't take it personally. They understand that you can't help it and it has nothing to do with them. So even, again, I realize that's a very tame thing compared to the severe issues that are addressed here. It rang true to me, I guess is the point. She said in the afterword that she thought people would either love or hate the ending. Personally, I absolutely loved it. I thought it was perfect, wouldn't change a thing. Out of all the books that I read for this video, Psych Ward Blues is definitely the best. It is overall the most intense experience, despite the fact that you could argue that there are other books that are maybe more gory or whatever. If you want something that is a little bit more representative of her work as a whole, I would probably pick this up, especially with this time of year. I feel like it's very appropriate for like Halloween season, I feel like. My camera died again. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And maybe I'll see you the next time around. Bye. If you're not really into